Welcome to Microsoft Excel 2019, Lesson 8, Analyzing Data by Megan Reese. This lesson is going to be slightly different from some of the others you've done, and it is an advanced lesson. And that is because in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on how to take massive amounts of data and get information from that data. How do I take it? How do I take all this stuff I have and make sense out of it? Okay, you saw this a little bit in lesson 7 where you had a massive amount of data from all the people auditioning for this play. This was in the application for 7. And you had to be like, okay, well, I just want to narrow it down. I only want to see all the girls who are in this grade who scored this high, right? And we actually did that kind of the long way. If I had showed you pivot tables then, it might have been a little easier for you to get that data to do what you wanted. You'll also, so that's one thing we're going to be learning today. You'll also find that the application is different. Instead of creating one document that incorporates a lot of these features, it's kind of hard to do, honestly, with the diversity of features. You're going to be having more of a little problem solving, a bunch of story problems that you'll be solving and figuring out which of these types is best, which one of these features is going to be best for you. So there's 3 main ones we're going to talk about, which is the what if analysis, pivot charts and tables, and then just some advanced charts that are designed to share data that's a little bit more complex than some of the stuff we've done in the past. So let's go ahead and get started with what if. All right, so in your assignment, I actually start out in lesson 1 here by having you do a scenario calculator, okay? And this first part, this A1 part, doesn't have anything new in it. It's nothing you've never done before. You're gonna be like, what? This is super easy, but I'm trying to get you to see what Excel was gonna be doing for you. So let's take an example. So I'm actually gonna go even simpler than this. So a scenario calculator is gonna start with numbers that you can change. It's gonna have a formula, and it's gonna have a question, okay? So it's going to say something like 5 and 15. Those are numbers I can change, okay? Now, if I were to do equals 5 plus 15, I'm going to get the right answer, but can I change these numbers? No, because this formula doesn't work, right? So my formula is this plus this, right? So now I have numbers I can change, and I have a number that is a formula. So if I were to change this to a 20, then I get a 25, okay? You've done this before. We've seen this. This is not new. This is like basic Excel, right? Basic math. You've been doing since lesson 2. Okay, but what if, here's my question. What if I say, oh, what if I wanted this number to be 100? What if I wanted this answer to say 100? What would I have to type in here to make this say 100? Well, most of us can just do that in our head, 95, right? That's really easy. So I can just calculate it in my head. But when you get more complicated, it might not be so easy. So for example, over here, I have 2 numbers that can change. My price is $15. I sold 350 of them, and that made me $5,250, okay? There's my formula. There's my 2 numbers that can be changed. And my question might be, and that's the whole thing, it's a scenario, so it could be lots of questions. What if I sold 400 of them? What would happen? What if I raise my price to $35? Or better yet, how much do I have to charge in order, if I only can sell 400, how much do I have to charge in order to make $16,000? Now that's a little bit trickier, right? Then I might have to sit there and go, well, 40, I figured out my first try. I didn't even know because I'm not very good at math. Okay, but I might have to go back around and figure it out, right? I might have to do a little bit of math and try to solve it. I might have to try several different scenarios before I get the answer that I want. Again, this one's very simple. It only has 2 factors and 1 answer, right? Now this one's a little bit trickier. So I have a stock price. I buy a stock on the stock market for $72 back in 2010. And I buy 30 shares. And so that cost me $2,160. I put $2,000 and change into the stock market back in 2010. And now my question is, what my future price? Okay, so if the future price, I'm just imagining, what if the price goes up to $80 and my 30 shares? Well, my future total will be worth $2,400 and I would have made $240, right? So now I've got a lot of factors in here. I've got several things, I've got several math problems, and I could come up with a lot of scenarios. I could say, well, what if I bought 40 shares instead? What if the stock price went up to $90? How much would I make? What if I want to increase it by $600? What if I want this number to say 600? What do I have to change on the future price? How much does the price have to go up in order for this increase to be $600? Okay. And now I'm like, okay, I'm 90, 95. And I could sit here and be like 91. And I can just kind of keep trying to get as close as I can. I actually found it, $92, right? But that took me 5 or 6 tries before I found the correct answer. And it could be way more complicated. What if it's like, you know, $92.37 or something, and I'm trying to get a very exact number? It might not be very easy. So that is what the scenario editor is. In this one, you are going to create a quick scenario here where you're going to answer these questions by doing the trial and error like I just did. Okay, same thing with this one. What do I have to get in order to get this score on my test? So you're going to do the math here. And I really want you to focus on those 3 things. The prices, the things that can change, how many are sold, the price and production costs can all be changed. And these 2 are where the math problems are. And I can ask various questions. And I just randomly picked questions. I could have asked a million questions to manipulate this data. Okay, so once you have A1 figured out, now we're ready to let Excel do the work for us. We're going to start out with goal seek. Okay, there's 3 different ways to do what if analysis. And we're not going to do, I don't think we're doing all of them. We're going to do goal seek and scenario manager. We're not going to do data table. Okay, so goal seek is very simple. It's basically what I just did here, only I don't know the answer. So let's say I want to know this increase. I want to say, what does my future price have to be? Actually, let's start up here where it's a little easier. Okay, so I'm going to make this an unusual number so that it's not as easy to do the math. Okay, so if I sell 654 tickets for $45 each, I'm going to make $29,000. Okay, so I'm going to come in here I'm going to put your cursor where the math is, where the formula is. And I'm going to go to what if and do goal seek. And I'm going to say, set the cell. I want this math to say $100,000. Okay, so I want to, oh, sorry. Let me do that again. So I'm going to go in here, goal seek. That's the cell. I want it to be set. So I'm saying I want this math problem to say 100,000. Okay. By changing what? By changing the price or by changing how many are sold? I'm going to do price. So what do I have to change the price to in order to make $100,000 off of 654 seats? Let's say I only have 654 seats to sell. I can't sell more than that. It's a one-night thing. That's as many seats as there are. So now I got to raise the price to get my goal of 100,000. So I'm just going to click OK. And then Excel is just going to do it for me. It's just going to sit there and go through it. Now, I've got to warn you, it can take a while, especially the first time you do it. It'll sit there and you'll be like, is it broken? Is it broken? Is it going? In the solution video, I actually paused it so you wouldn't just be sitting there forever. The first time through can take a while. And in a second, you're going to see it will change from number 1 to number 2. It'll show you the next iteration. Okay, so there it is. Oh, then it went to 3. Okay, we're on 4, 5, 6, and it finally found a solution. And notice there it is. I have to charge $152.91 if I want to make $100,000. So it did the math for me. Look how exact that had to be, right? Like that would have taken me a while to figure that out, especially if it was really weird numbers or if there were multiple factors. So let's move on to this one that does have a little bit more to it. And again, you want to base your question around where your formula is. Okay. I mean, what happens if I do 60 shares? Well, I can just type that in and I know the answer. So that's not very interesting. But if I want to set an increase, I want to increase this stock price. I want to increase my income by $1,000. I want this to say 1,000 or 1,200 or something like that. What does it have to go up by in order for me to make that much money on it? Okay. So I'm going to come in here to insert and go to, not insert, sorry, data, what if, goal seek. And I'm setting, make sure you always start with the cell that the formula is in, that you're manipulating, where you want your answer to be. I want this answer to say $1,000, and I'm going to do that by changing the future price. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, give it a minute. It's going to work its way through it. And this one's going a lot quicker this time. Great time to go get yourself a Coke. Okay, there it is. So now I know it would have to go up to $105 in order for me to make $1,000 on this purchase, in order for me to make that much money. And then I would ask myself, okay, can I make that much? Can it, in 10 years, would it go up by that much? Whatever. Okay, so that's how you do goal seek. Okay, notice I did cancel and it sent it back to where it was originally. In your assignment, there are reset buttons so that if you push OK, but you didn't mean to, and you want to just go back to the beginning, you can push reset. That's just a macro that's doing that. And then you can reset it back to where you were. Okay, always save before you push a reset button though. You never know, might mess it up. Okay. All right, so that should get you through this one. This scenario is kind of what we just did with the ticket price, and breaking even means getting it to 0. And then yearly salary, how much do I have to make? This is a great one, okay? Like, honestly, this is something you can use in your real life. Like, I want to have a car, and I want to have an apartment, and I want to have a phone, and I want to have all these things. Well, how much do you have to make a year in order to actually be able to pay for all those things? And then go find a job that, makes that much money, right? So it's not a bad idea to like run a scenario like this and be like, what do I have to make? It's because sometimes you don't have any concept of how much $30,000 is really, So I think that should get you through this section and the hourly wage as well. Those are just 3 different scenarios using GoalSeek. The next thing is Scenario Manager, which is a lot more complex. GoalSeek is when you just have a very simple question to ask. Scenario is when you're like, compare these different possibilities and see which one is best. And honestly, the example that I gave you in your assignment is like exactly real life for me. Like, I bought a house just like a year ago, and this is exactly what I was doing. Although I have to admit, I did not know about Scenario Manager then, and I'm kind of mad because it would have been really helpful, because we're looking at different houses. Well, what if we get this much out of our house, and what if we buy this house and it's that much, and what if we can get our interest rate to that amount, and what if we pay off our debt or don't pay off our debt, and what if we take money out? And there's all these what if questions. Ultimately, what's my house payment going to be, right? Like, what's my house payment going to be? How can I keep my house payment low, but still, and so that's different scenarios and different options that we had. We had like 3 different houses we're looking at. We're deciding whether to pay off our debts or not, or roll those into the new loan. And those are lots of what if questions. And these are real questions like you're going to be asking when you get older. So let's go through this. This one's much simpler than the one you'll do in your assignment, but the idea is the same. Let's say I'm planning a wedding, and I have several options, like how many guests are we going to invite? How much are we what are we going to order for food? Which venue should we use? There could be multiple venues. And so there's lots of different scenarios of how I could plan my wedding, and ultimately, what's my bottom line? What's it going to cost me? Okay. So yes, I could figure it all out going this way, but I'm going to get a little summary sheet that's going to look really nice. So I'm going to come in here because total is kind of where I want it. I'm going to go into data, and I'm going to go to what if analysis and scenario manager. Okay. And I'm going to start a new scenario. My first scenario is going to be like Crystal Springs. I'm making that up, but let's say that that's the name of a venue I want to go to. So I'm like, what if we did Crystal Springs? What if we went there? So it wants to know what cells are you going to change? Okay, what is going to change? Well, I want to change my number of guests, the venue cost. Notice I'm putting a comma in there. This is fixed, meaning that no matter where I go, I'm going to put that's the cake, the dress, whatever. And then maybe how much I charge in food, right? Is all going to change. So I click OK, and now it's going to say, what do you want to change it to? Well, let's say I have, if Crystal Springs can fit 500 people, it's going to be a bigger venue, but it costs more. It's $10,000 to rent it, and the food is more expensive, so it's going to be $15 a plate for everybody who comes. So I'm going to go ahead and say, OK, now I have my first scenario. Now I'm going to add a new scenario. Let's say this is going to be mom's backyard, okay, with bargain basement wedding, okay? And I'm probably going to change the exact same things, venue cost, everything, okay? In this case, B12, which is number of guests, I can't invite 500 people to a guest. I'm going to have a much smaller wedding. Like the most people I can invite in mom's backyard is like 100 people. But this is free. I don't have to pay anything because mom's going to let me do it for free. And then this is way cheaper. We found something else we can do that's only $5 a guest. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. There's my second scenario, okay? And then my next one's going to be Magnolia Hills. I don't know. Sounds like there probably really is one named that. I'm going to do the same 3. I'll notice I could change them, but in this case, I'm going to make them the same. Click OK. And this place is smaller, so I can only do 300. But it only costs $5,000 to rent it. And the food's slightly cheaper at $8.50. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. So now I have these 3 different scenarios. Now here's where it gets different. I can add new ones, I can delete them, I can edit them and change them. Merge, you don't really want to worry about. Merge is if you want to merge it with another scenario from another sheet, so don't worry about that. I can also do show. We'll come back to summary because that's what we're going to do. But if you do show, you can click on each one and it will go through and do the math for you really quick. So it's like a GoalSeek. It does an individual GoalSeek for each one. And that might be all you need is just to look at it, and it just changes all these numbers for you. But we're going to go ahead and do summary. So you're going to click on summary, and you're going to go ahead and click, we're going to do either a pivot table or a summary. We can try the one. Let's do a regular summary, see what happens here. So I click on this, and it's actually going to create a new page for me. Okay, just be warned, by the time you're done with this assignment, you're going to have a lot of extra sheets that they're just going to be there because it creates new pages. Okay, so let's go ahead. It's planning it out for me. Okay, that took a minute, so don't be surprised if it takes a minute. But now I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay. Now, one of the drawbacks is it's not going to tell you the name. Okay, the names. So I'm going to actually just type them in. So that's guests, and this is venue, and this is food. Those are the 3 factors I was looking at, right? And then, of course, this is the total cost. So now I can look at it and be like, okay, Crystal Springs is going to cost me $19,000, Mom's Backyard is going to be $2,000, and Magnolia Hills is going to be $9,000. And that gives me a better idea of what I want to do. Notice that it gave me a new page. Okay, I now have a different page here than I had before. So this is one of those things that has a lot of application for your life if you look for it. And it's something I didn't look into this until recently, and I wish I had looked earlier, because there have been many times in my life where this really would have been helpful when you're trying to make a difficult financial decision and you want to compare a lot of different options. Scenario editor is great. You could do lots of different scenarios, more than just 3. Now you'll notice that when we did that and we went in here, we went to what if analysis, and there was a pivot as an example. When we did summary, it said you could also do a pivot table. So if I were to do that, this is not going to make a whole lot of sense, but it's a good segue into the next thing we're going to be talking about, which is pivot tables. Okay. And it turns this into a pivot table where I can be like, oh, okay, Crystal String, it just puts it in here. Now, it's not that useful because it's not complex enough for a pivot table, but just know that there is a connection between doing what if analysis and a pivot table. Okay. And pivot tables are the next thing that we're going to talk about. Okay, so for pivot tables, I actually pulled in information from lesson 7 because it's perfect for a pivot chart, and it's information you've dealt with before that's familiar to you. And so we have all this information, and as you know, there's a lot of analysis in lesson 7 where you had to be like, okay, I need to see, I need to find a dancer, the part of Maisie. She needs to be a good singer and a good dancer. So I need to find a girl that's the right height, that is has a high singing score and a high dancing score, right? And so those are all things I might be looking at. I don't want to be a 7th grader. I need somebody a little bit more mature, maybe a 9th grader for that. So you can kind of find, you guys used the filter to do that, okay? Pivot table might actually be a better option. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we want to do with the pivot table is it's a little bit easier to work with if it's actually a table. So we're going to go to data and we're going to turn it into, go to insert, and we're going to turn it into a table. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and make that a table, but we don't want it to look like a table because the reason we want it to be a table is because then I can click anywhere inside and it will know. Otherwise I have to highlight it every time. Okay. So I'm just going to come in here and do none. So it doesn't even really look like a table, except it's got the little drop downs, right? But now I can click anywhere inside. I can name the table, which I don't know if I ever actually taught you how to do that. So I can name this table, Susical, I don't know if I spelled that right, but okay, so now I'm ready to make a pivot table, okay? And what a pivot table is going to do is allow me to use filters going lots of directions, okay? So I'm going to go over here to data, and I'm going to go to, not data, insert, and I'm going to go to pivot. Now there's tables, and there's also charts, okay? We're going to do tables first. We'll do charts in a minute. So when you choose to do a table, you can either create one from scratch or you can do recommended. Just like when you do a chart, you highlight information and you can do recommended charts and it will kind of tell you which one's probably best. So we'll start with recommended. That is in your assignment. You're going to do a recommended chart. Now notice it automatically knows exactly what information I'm trying to include. And that is why I turned it into a table. Okay. It's taking a second. It's thinking about it because it's analyzing the data for me and coming up with some ideas of how I can do this. Okay. But it already knows what information is in there. So it's saying some of acting score, some of vocal score, some of dancing score. And it just sets up several different types you can do. So let's take a look at some of these. Like if I do this one, okay, notice I click OK and it will create a new page. Okay. I don't lose my old stuff. It's still there. But here's my new page. And this one's very, very simple. It's saying, okay, my row labels are callback, cut, ensemble, and how many are callback, how many have been cut, and how many have been in the ensemble. And that's it. Now I can add to it. I can be like, oh, I really wish I could add grade to that, And so I can add pieces to it. I can do this as, okay, but of those callbacks, how many of them were 7th graders, right? And now I know, okay, 41. I don't know how you get 57 and a half 7th graders cut, but that sounds dangerous. But 41 of the people we cut were 7th graders, or we called back were 7th graders, or something like that. So that's just one way to do it. Okay, I can come back in here, where to go back to my original information. and go to insert and recommend it again, and maybe pick a different one. And sometimes this is a great starting off point, and then you can add to it. Or it's fine just how it is. In your assignment, it'll be fine how it is, and you will add to it and change a few things. But let's take a look at another one. So I'm going to do, vocal score, average score. I don't know. I don't really love any of these, to tell you the truth. Let's do this one. Okay. So it's going to take a minute. Now, what I want you to notice is that over here are the fields. It isn't using all the fields. It only used 3 of them. So recommended is going to be really simple. Notice I also lose a lot of my formatting. Okay. So I can choose to change them. There are 4 areas. I have filters, columns, rows, and values. So I can choose, I want gender to be a filter. I want to add dancing score. And you can kind of see what happens when you do that. Like that, you're like, whoa, what did I just do? Maybe I don't want to do that. And it can be incredibly daunting sometimes. When you're not sure how to organize it and where to put each thing to fit in each of these 4 areas. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, with a pivot table is like, what is a filter? What is columns? What is rows? What will it do if I do that? And there is a lot of just like experimentation there where you try different things and see what works. One other thing I want to point out that is in your assignment is that you can change the way this is totaled. So maybe instead of the number cut, I could do summarize values by count or average or max. Like you can use other things in here. I don't know if that makes particular sense with this one. But you can choose, right click, summarize values by average, and you can actually change math. Again, I don't know that it makes sense for this particular type of data, but you can change that, and there will be parts what asks you to do that, because on yours you're doing like grade point average, and so it's going to want the average grade point average rather than the total grade point average. So let's go ahead and start one from scratch, from the very beginning. So we're going to go to our original data, and we're going to go to insert, and we're going to do pivot table. It automatically knows it's the name of this document because I have it in here because I made it a table. I click OK, and I get a new page entirely. Okay, and notice this one's blank. Okay, I've got my pivot table over here, and then I've got all my information over here. It's a clean slate. I can drag over whatever I want to do. So these are your 4 areas. Your filter allows you to filter by like, show me everyone in this grade, show me everyone that's male or female, show everyone that does height, right? So your filter allows you to choose the specific person and tell me about them. Okay, so it's a pull down menu, just like the filters you see when you did your filter earlier. The values, I'm going to skip down here. Values are anything that has math in it. Okay, so if there's a math, there's a number, and there, that you're trying to add a math, it's probably going to go in values. Rows and columns can be a little bit confusing, but it isn't if you think of it like a graph, right? Like when I design a graph, I might be like, okay, I'm going to have like all the different types of animals here, and then I'm going to have how many here? Like what's going this way and what's going this way in your graph, right? So I actually find I don't use columns as often because of that. For example, if I were to pull something like gender into columns, it's going to make a male column and a female column, which is pretty easy to manage because there's only 2 options in this scenario, right? If I were to pull grade into columns, it's going to show me each of the options for grade. So it's going to make a 7 column, an 8 column, and a 9 column, right? Whereas rows are going to go down the other side. So I probably want to put my student names in my rows, right? So now I can see my rows, and then I've got my column labels here, okay? So I find that I actually don't use columns as often, at least in this particular data, it's not that useful, but let's go ahead and go back a second here. So I probably want to put my student names here. So I have rows. And then I probably want to do like their scores are probably going to go in values. So I can look at each individual score, their acting score and their dancing score. Okay, and then I probably want to do the total score as well. So now it's showing me each person's name and what their scores were. Okay. And now I want to be able to put my grades here and my gender here. Okay, and then status, I could put status as my filter as well. So I can filter out all the people that have already been cut, right? So now I can say, okay, I want people that have a callback. Okay, so now I only have my callback people. And I want females, I guess. And show me everybody that's in 9th grade. And it just kind of helps me get this. So this might help me. Okay, I want somebody who got a callback, who's got a high grade, and then it's going to show me, you know, what their scores were for each thing. And it is annoying how it does lose its formatting. So, and every time you change it, it'll continue to lose the formatting, which I find irritating. I don't know if there's a trick to that, but I can come in here and I can see everybody that's in that category. But anyway, that allows me to kind of quickly look at lots of factors all in one place. Okay. And so it's just kind of this multi-level way of filtering information that's much deeper than the other one that you've learned. So there are lots of ways to do this, and it's kind of fun to see what happens if I put what happens if I put height in here. What will happen? Well, then it's going to put their height right underneath their name, which I might like that. It might be something I wanted to do. What if I put it over here in columns? Well, that's a mess, right? It's going to make a column for every single type of height there is, right? Like it's going to go forever. That's probably not going to work for me, right? It might be better to do it as a filter, right? So now I can do the filter and choose, I can select multiple items, and I just want, this person has to be, maybe I'm getting a romantic lead and they have to be at least, 5'6" or above, because the guy that I've cast is, 5'6", and I don't want it to be different or whatever. So I could do that, and then I'm getting, kind of what I'm looking for there. Like, okay, it's got to be one of these two, right? So that's kind of one of the ways that you would use a pivot table. So let's take a look about what if I did a pivot chart, which I'm not sure how well that's going to work with this data, but we're going to go and give it a try. So we're going to go to Insert and go to Pivot Table or Pivot Chart, which is over here. And it knows the range. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And it's kind of the same thing where I get to pick and choose what I want to be in my chart. In this case, I probably don't want student name. I don't want a column for, I don't want a thing for every single student. So maybe I could go with, let's see what happens when I put gender here as a filter. I just want to know, what kind of type of kids have been trying out for my show, right? And so again, I can kind of play with this a little bit and see what it's going to give me, right? And let's do total scores. Now it needs something to measure, okay? So it needs numbers to measure. So I'm going to go to total score and I'm going to put that in my values, right? Because that's what I'm measuring is their total score. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And so now we're looking at, because of the way I set this up with the axis here, I've got my filter set. So I can see each individual gender and then how many, how high the scores are. So it looks like 7th grade girls got higher scores in general than like a lot of the other areas, whereas 7th grade boys didn't score near as high, right? So I can kind of look at that information. These are all fake numbers that I randomly generated, so don't get offended. And I could be like, you know what? I don't really want to see 7th graders. I don't want to see just the 9th graders. And then I can use that as a filter to get just the information I want. Or I only want to look at the girls, right? And then I can get the filter for that as well and compare or whatever, though that's kind of boring right there. Okay, so it's kind of doing the same thing. It's just putting it in chart in a chart format instead, right? Or maybe I want to look at acting scores, vocal scores, and dancing scores. So those are the numbers. So values are going to be the things that actually get graphed, right? And then I'm going to go back and get all my grades back. Okay, so now I can see overall that my acting scores were higher for which group were my acting scores higher for versus them. And it's just for, information, whatever. And it can be used in lots of ways. So that's how you would do it with a pivot chart. And again, there's no right or wrong necessarily. Well, there's definitely wrongs where you're like, that doesn't work. But there's lots of different ways you can use a pivot chart to get the data that you need. In yours, it asks you to change the type. So remember that if you're like, oh, I want the total score, for example, to be different, I could click on that and do change series chart type. And I want the total score to be, maybe an area chart or something. So you can change, make it a combination chart like we learned back in lesson 3. So anyway, there's how you do a pivot chart. So for section C, we're going to be learning about 5 different types of charts. These are more advanced charts. Not necessarily harder to make, but harder to maybe think of examples, harder to set up in some cases. And so pay close attention, because in your practice, it's all set up for you. It's going to be very easy to just highlight it and make the graph. But in your application, I'm going to give you raw data, and you have to figure out, you may have to change the data, rearrange it to make it work. So pay attention to how the data is arranged, because that's one of the focuses on this lesson as well. Is it's one thing to just graph information that already exists and make a graph out of it. It's another thing to go find information and then set it up properly in Excel to make it look the way you want. So we're going to go through these really quickly. The first one is a map chart, and I got to be honest, I did not discover this until I was doing the PowerPoint lessons, and I was like, where has this been? It is super cool. So with maps, you can actually make a map right there in Excel. If you've done PowerPoint lessons, you already know that. And you can go by country, state, county, and it has to have a number. So I could just do counties and then some sort of number, state and number, county, or country and number, or whatever. So let's say I'm doing countries. If I do countries, it's going to give me a world map. Okay, so if I type in, I'm just going to type in some random countries, so for whatever reason. And then let's say my number, for some reason, this is ranked. It could be a rank, like ranked first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Okay, in that case, we're just ranking it. So I would highlight this, insert, go to maps. Oops, wrong one. Don't do 3D maps. And it will literally make a map for me, and it will highlight the different countries I listed in order. So 1 is going to be lighter than 5, right? Because number 1 is ranked number 1. Now, what if it was, say, population? Okay, I'm not going to bother to look that up, but if I have a big number in here, okay, it's going to adjust that a little bit. There we go. And so now it's looking at population. It's going to rank it that way. Okay, so the darkest one has the highest population, and the lightest one has the smallest population. So it depends on what the number is. Like I'm doing a rank, I'm doing population, I'm doing, number of, I don't know, there's lots of different ways you could do that. But that's how it's going to look on a world map. Okay, now we could do a state instead. So if I did, Utah, New Mexico, Tennessee, I need to add an E on that, Georgia, and Vermont, okay. All right, and so now I can go in here and do the state. There we go. And it's highlighting the different states, 5 being the darkest, 1 being the lightest. Now, if you want to do counties, you have to say what county it is. And this is actually directly in your assignment, but you can't just do the county by itself. You'd have to do, I'm going to do Utah because that's where I'm from, so I don't have to think about it. Emory, okay. So those are all counties in my country, in my state. And then I could do the maps there. And, there we go, it worked. So now it's highlighting those particular counties here in Utah and giving me a rank, Now, what if it was like, I don't know, coronavirus numbers, right? Like, there's, 987 cases here, but King County had like 18, and Washington County had 28, and Wayne County literally had like 3, I swear. Okay, again, I'm making these numbers up. I don't really know what they are. But I could make it say, corona cases. And it's going to give me a little bit more meaning to that, right? So, and so it's going to show me. And you've seen graphs like this. Like, honestly, during the coronavirus, you could look up, your state, and it would basically make this graph for you, right? Show you which counties were the most dangerous counties, right? Now, we want to talk a little bit, too, about color. It's a little bit tricky in this one, so I'm going to right-click and go to, you want to get where it says Format Data Series. So I'm going to click on the actual state here, go to Format Data Series, and what you want to do is go to Series Color right here. So that's where it's a little tricky. You've got sequential color and diverging colors, and sequential, if you do sequential, then you would just pick, it's just a 2-color one, and this just allows you to pick, 2 very different colors, right? And you can also do diverging, where you have 3 different colors, and maybe the middle is white and whatnot. And there you go. And I was having issues getting it to stay white. Like, I don't know why it keeps turning blue. One way around that is I just chose a different chart style, and that kind of tended to fix it. one thing you could do if you're having issues with that is to go to where instead of saying automatic, you could go to no fill, and then it will get rid of the color. Or you could do solid fill and choose gray or something. If you wanted to do it by hand, you could do it that way so that that it's staying. The ones, the counties that we're not focusing on don't change color or whatever. So that's how you do a map. Kind of fun. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So NAF and Sunburst is the one I spend the most time on in your lessons. So the next one is Sunburst, and Sunbursts are like a hierarchy. Okay, they show a bit of a narrowing down. So you notice in this one I've got like each grade, and then each quarter, and then my GPA for that quarter. So if I were to turn that into a Sunburst, and the hardest thing about Sunburst is finding it. It's right here, okay, and it's right there. And it's just going to give me a hierarchy. So I've got 7th, 8th, and 9th in the inside ring, and then I've got each quarter, and the thickness of how white it is based on this GPA. And it's kind of hard to tell because these numbers are such a small difference between each one. But you'll notice I got a really bad grade in 4th quarter of 8th grade, and you can see that look how small 4th quarter of 8th grade is. Compared to when I got a 4.0 in 7th grade, 4th quarter is a much wider one, right? So I want you to think about this. Like, this is a hierarchy, right? I did this in Word, and if you've used Word already, this shouldn't be new to you. But I just went and did a smart art, right, and created a hierarchy. So this is the school departments at my school, right? So we've got performing arts, which is divided into these areas. We've got language arts, which has no division. It's just you're a language arts teacher, right? Social, foreign language in my school, we just have Spanish and French. Math, science isn't really divided. CTE, facts, business, technology teachers. We've got social studies and special ed. And I could maybe get more picky about divisions. But in this type of hierarchy, okay, if it's not even, right? If I were to create a hierarchy, I'm going to go back into Smart Art and create a hierarchy of the one we just did. No one ever uses that. Okay, so I would be like grades, and then I've got 7th grade, and then below that it's, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then 8th grade. It's going to be equal, right? Like every single one is the same. Like it's going to have the same number. And that is why when you created this, it was even all the way around. Okay. But on this one, this other one over here, I've just written it out. So I took this right here, school departments, right? And I said, okay, performing arts, there's performing arts in this column, and then there's the different types. And then I put in how many teachers we have in each of those areas. We have 1 dance teacher, 2 art teachers, 3 music teachers, and 1 theater teacher, right? And language, I separated that out. So I just typed it in. And if there's a division, I put it in there. If there was no division, like math, there's just 8 math teachers. There's no division. So I left that blank. Now, because there are holes in there, when I go in to make it, it's going to look like that, right? It's actually going to be uneven because it is uneven, right? You've got performing arts, and then we've got a different area. But see, the dance teacher is really thin. Music teacher is wider because there are 3 music teachers. There's only 1 dance teacher. Now, you may be asked to change colors, which is tricky, okay? If you're changing a color of a section, like maybe I want each quarter to be a different color, it can be a little hard to get it, like right there, I got it to highlight the whole section. I just kind of clicked a few times until this whole section is highlighted. And then I would change it, just like you change anything else, right? I can change it a different color. Or better yet is to right click and choose the color change here, okay? But it can be hard sometimes to isolate exactly which one. Like there you go. I had to just click several times, and then I'm able to get the color that I want. So in your assignment, you'll be doing like your family tree. And so each generation needs to be a different color on each side. And so that can be a bit of a challenge. Just keep clicking until you get it isolated to the one that you want, like that. Okay, so that is how a sunburst works. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is a funnel. This one is super, super simple, but what you need to do is understand where it's coming from. A funnel narrows down information. It says, okay, like say we had a competition and we had 280 people enter, right? And level 1, they competed, and from that 280, level 1, a bunch of them were cut, and now I'm down to 98, right? So now I have 98 people competing, and they go into level 2, and then we go into level 3, level 4, and we're getting down to less and less people each round, right? So now we're to level 6, we only have 21 people left. So we're going to go ahead and do that one. That's a funnel. And I believe it's right here below the waterfall one, which we'll do in a second. That's a funnel. So again, it's a very simple graph. But it's important that you understand when you would use it. I think in your assignment, I have a sales pool. Like I'm a salesman, I go out, I call 280 people. Of those 280, 98 say, yeah, you can come to my house. And of the ones that said I could come to their house, only 56 actually let me into the house and showed up for the appointment. And of those 56, 48 put in an order. And of those 40, so it's all the different levels and how it kind of narrows down to how many sales you actually got. My sales pool had 280 people in it, but ultimately I only got 21 sales, right? And that's pretty much how life works in a lot of things, where you have a big pool of people and it just narrows down, maybe auditions or something like that. Okay, so that's a funnel. Again, very simple one. So the next one is a waterfall, and the waterfall is a little different because it's about positives and negatives. Okay, it's about ups and downs. It's a little bit, if you remember from spark lines, the win-loss, where it would go up and down, right? It's a little bit like that. It's like making a big win-loss graph, okay? So you have to have negatives and positives. So if I were to do this, and let's say I'm doing a weigh, like I'm weighing in each week and trying to lose weight, right? So week 1, I started at 138. I lost a lot of weight the week 2, and I'm kind of bouncing up and down on my weight. Now, if I were to graph this as is, as a waterfall chart, it's going to be pretty boring, okay? That's lame, okay? It would be better as a line chart, right? A line chart would be far better for that, because this is just showing how I did, right? It'd be better if I made a line chart like that and I could see how my weight's going, right? So that's not very helpful. So what I'm going to do is do a decrease, right? So I'm going to start with 0 and then do equals this minus that. Okay, so I lost, so actually I want to do the other way, this minus this, so I can get a negative number, right? So I lost 6 pounds that week, and then this week I lost 2, gained 3, lost 5, so I'm getting negative and positive numbers. So now, when I do it, I'm just going to do these 2 columns and create a waterfall, and that's going to be a lot more interesting because it's going to show me, okay, in this case, I want the orange. The orange shows it's a good week, right? So I lost the most weight in this week. Week 2 shows me that's where I lost my most weight. And it kind of shows me what weeks were my bad weeks, right? That I didn't do very well. So this is a much better graph to showing how things go positive and negative. So you would only use it using data that has positive and negatives. I think in your example, it's money. So money coming in is one color, money going out is another color. But it's going to be something with positives and negatives. That's basically your waterfall. Okay. All right. And then the last one we're going to talk about is box and whisker. Box and whisker is used a lot in studies and research. Okay. So if you interview a bunch of people and you get a bunch of data, what you're really trying to do is find outliers. Okay. So you want to find out kind of what most people, where the range is, like how big is the range? And then are there a few people that are outliers? So for example, I could look at my grades in MOS last semester, right? And it could be like, wow, out of my 40 kids, 38 passed. They got their MOS training. Like, yay, 38 passed. But I had 2 kids who got like a 40%, right? They got way low because they didn't do anything. They skipped all the lessons and wasted their time, right? Those 2 kids are outliers. They're not necessarily a reflection of my program or how well I do. There's probably another factor that's making them way off, having their numbers completely out. And I don't necessarily want to include them in my results because I kind of want them to show that they exist, but are there a lot of outliers and why are they out there? And is it because the program didn't work or is it because they just didn't come to school, right? So those are outliers where you're like, what are these random numbers? In general, most kids are getting an 80% on my test, but then I had like 3 kids that got really, really low, right? They're outliers. That's not a typical response to what I'm doing, right? So the number I have here, honestly, this has no meaning. I literally just picked some numbers between like 15 and 30 something, 40. And then I put some states on it. So this one actually has no actual meaning. But if I were to graph this with a box and whisker, okay, so come in here and I always forget where it's at, right there, with the histogram. It's right there, that's your box and whisker. And it will show you kind of the range now there's no outliers yet because I made this between the numbers I did a rand between and did 15 and 40. So there's no outliers because everything is within that box, right? But you can see that Las Vegas has a much smaller, like everything's within the same. There's a lot more numbers in this range. And you can see that like the New York has a number of high numbers. and Las Vegas is more in the middle, right? But if I had some outliers in here, let's say I change this to a 4 and I change this to a 60, okay? And all of a sudden I have these numbers that are way off. They're really not in the range that I've given. They're kind of random numbers that don't quite fit my data. That's a way for me to say, okay, these are things that might not have had it, like the number might have nothing to do with what my data was saying, right? Those are outliers, and there's not very many of them. If there's a lot of outliers, then that's going to change things. So for example, I just changed New York to have a bunch of small numbers, and it just shifted it down. There was enough of them in that range that it becomes part of the big box, right? But if there's just the one number that's off that doesn't match any other data, it's going to make it an outlier. Let's make this, oh, see now it didn't do it in this one because there's a 2 here. See, now it just adjusted. But if I have like a high number, let's put 100 in there, it's going to give me an outlier up here saying, that's not really part of the data. There was one random score. It's like if you have a classroom and there's one genius in the class who scores perfect score every time, but everybody else is getting like an average of 80%. That genius is an outlier. We don't want to judge the rest of us based on that genius is going to change the average, right? If we keep the genius in there, it's going to make the class average totally different because that genius is kind of screwing up our average, right? Same way when you have a class where everyone's doing pretty well and then there's one kid who never shows up, gets a low score. If I average with that kid in it, it's going to make the whole average come down, even though it was just one kid and he just never came. It's an outlier, okay? So that's the way a box and whisker works. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about today is just how to protect your data. And I've been using this through this whole thing. Okay, you've seen this throughout the entire thing where you are unable to click on things. So for example, I'm just opening up Excel 2 and I've got my score sheet here. I don't want you guys to be able to go in and be like, oh yeah, I got that 20 points. I got it. I want you to have to actually do it. I don't want you to have access to this, so I block it so that you can't. If I try to click on it or type, like I can set it so that you can't even click on it, or I can just set it so that you can't type there, okay? And that is a way to restrict some of the access you have to the information, like to the document stuff I put in here, okay? And so I'm going to show you how you did that. And of course, yes, I saved this for last. This isn't something I really wanted you to know back in lesson 2. So there's 2 ways to do it. You can block it, you can restrict access to the workbook from file, and you can do it within the workbook, okay? So for file, you would go in here and you go to info, and there's protect workbook, okay? Now there's a lot of options here. So like always open read only, for example. This is great. Like let's say I create a document and I want you guys, like kind of like when you guys open up lesson 2, if I set it to always open read only, then it would immediately set it up in such a way that you can't save, right? So that you have to create your own copy of it. So you can't change my original, right? Like you can open it up and it will make you, it'll automatically make you resave it with a new name because it doesn't want you to change the original. Now I don't have to do that in my lab because it kind of does that automatically with the way my lab is set up, but that way you can hand someone a document and they can't change the original that you have. Encrypt with a password, you can just click on this and you can give it a password. So to even open the document, they have to know the password to get past it, okay? Be careful with that because you could forget the password and then you are locked out. So I found some old files from like the late 90s that I had encrypted because they were like poems I wrote in middle school or something like that. And they were all password protected. And I was like, oh, what password did I choose, as a 10th grader? I actually remembered, amazingly enough. I tried a bunch of things and figured it out. But once it's with a password, like how are you going to open that? Protect the current sheet. So control what type of changes it can have. Protect the workbook entirely. It just means that it's protected means that they can't change it. Okay. Restrict access. So that's another one. And so some of these, and mark as final, I haven't really used that before, but that's how you do it. I could see them asking you that in the test to mark something as final. That just means this is the final version it's done, right? And I have a million versions of lesson 8 right now in my document because I have like a working version, I have the key version, I have the start, like while I'm creating it, I have lots of versions of it. So once I'm like, okay, this is the one that's done, mark it as final, right? So those are all things I can do in the info file on file, okay? Now I can also do it within the document. Let's say for some reason I don't want you to be able to change this, right? So I can do what's called locking and unlocking cells. So if I highlight the whole thing by clicking on this box right here, I can right click and go to Format Cells and go to Protection, okay? And I can say I want them all locked, okay? Now it won't actually do anything immediately. Nothing's done because I haven't protected the document. But if I go to Review or View, or what is that? I always forget where it's at, Review, and I do Protect Sheet, okay? It's gonna ask me all kinds of questions of what I wanna do to protect it. So I could say, protect it so that you can't select locked or unlocked cells. If I do that, I can't click on anything. Okay, it's totally blocked. I can't click on anything. I can unprotect the sheet and now I can click on it again. Okay, so protect sheet. And then I could say, you know what though? I want these ones, everything's locked, but I want these ones to be unlocked. Okay, so I'm going to unlock them, right? So now when I protect it, I'm going to say that I can select unlocked cells, but I can't select locked cells. Okay, so now I can't click anywhere except those boxes that are locked. Okay, so when you're protecting, you can decide, oh, you can select locked cells, but you can't change them. That was how lesson 2 was before when I opened it up. So you can click there, but if you try to change it, you're going to get an error message, right? But these ones I can change because they're unlocked. Okay, so you can actually pick and choose specific parts of a document that are locked and unlocked. Now, when you protect it, I don't usually bother. Like, you could go back in your old lessons and be like, oh, all this time, all I had to do is do review and unprotect, and I could have just gone in and cheated to my heart's content, although then you wouldn't have learned anything. But if I'm like really nervous about that, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I could put a password in there, right? Like, there's my password. I click OK. I type it again. Okay, and now if you try to unprotect it, I can protect it. And if you try to unprotect it, it's going to ask you for the password. Hold on. Protect sheet. Okay. Or not. But there we go. Unprotect. Okay, then I have to open my thing, and then now I can get to it. Okay, so that's how you protect and unprotect the sheet from information. Okay, and it's not something that a lot of people use, but I use it all the time as a teacher, because I use Excel in a lot of lessons, and I don't want my students to be able, like, sometimes I have the answer key hidden somewhere, and I don't want them to be able to get access to it. Like, I have it there, but I've locked it so that they can't get to it, right? But it makes the whole document work so that when they enter the right answer, they get a check mark, but I don't want you to be able to get in and fix that, so I just lock you out. But there are some drawbacks to it, mainly because when you protect a sheet, you can't get auto sum. Like, a lot of the things are grayed out. Although you have a lot of options here when you protect it, okay? There are other things in here like sort and delete. These are all the things that you can't do, or that you allow you to do. So I can say use sort. I can say use auto filter. You know, I can still keep that in there. And then let's see if it works here. So yeah, see, auto sum still not working. And that's I've looked that up. I've never found a way around that you can still maintain. You can still use autofill. Like, auto filter, sure, but autofill isn't in here. I wish it were. So it does kind of limit what you can do when it's locked that way. So it's kind of irritating. But anyway, that's one of the things that you might see, especially in the expert test. I think that was in the expert test for sure. But the last thing I want to talk about today is getting you ready for the application. It's a little bit like the application in lesson 3, where this is what it looks like, where you're creating something. It's not like a full document. It's going to have 12 different things you have to create using the subjects you've learned. And so you'll want to check these off as you do each one. And so it won't tell you what type of graph to make. You have to figure it out based on what's given. So it is a little bit trickier to figure out. But there's one thing I want to make sure you know how to do, and that is how to do a camera picture and how to do a snipping picture. Okay. So a little crash course on the camera. You click on what you want to highlight, what you want to take a picture of. It could be multiple things or just one box, and then you click on the camera button like this, and then wherever you click, it will bring it over. Any changes you make will show up in the picture. Okay. Now I have mine set here. We did that in a previous lesson. If yours is not there, then you're going to want to go over to options and customize your quick access toolbar. Go to all commands, go find camera, and put it in there so that's easy to reach, because you are going to use it quite a bit in this lesson. If it's the thing you're taking a picture of is something that's going to change, like a pivot chart, you don't want to use camera, because then when you change it, it's not going to work, right? So by the time you finish the application, you'll have a bunch of sheets in here of all the pivot tables and charts that you're creating. And you could just create a different pivot chart for each one and take a picture of it. But you can also use the snipping tool. So to use the snipping tool, you click on this little corner window here and just type the word snip, and snipping tool will come up. Go ahead and click on that. And then you don't really have to do anything but press new. Okay, so if you're in here and you're trying to copy something you made, you would just go to new and then just draw where you want it to be, and then it will make a copy of it. And then you just do edit copy and pull it over to wherever it is it wants you to paste it, and then you can right click and paste it. So you just go to paste right here, and that will paste it over. So it kind of does the same thing Camera does, but it takes a still picture. It's not going to change. If you make it, if you alter something in the original, it's not going to change it. It just takes a snapshot, a screenshot. Okay, you can also do the screenshot, but I found that to be pretty finicky. It doesn't always work the way that I want it to. So you're welcome to try it. If it gives you what you want, then great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. So just one last thing I want you to be aware of so that you are ready to do the application for lesson 8, and then you're done. All 8 lessons, well done. Most likely you could probably pass the expert test at this point. I have not covered everything in the expert test, but it probably covered enough that you can pass it. So just know that that's something you could do if you finished lessons 7 and 8. If you do geometrics and after you've done these 2 lessons, then you're even more likely to pass the expert test. So hopefully you're able to do that. And thank you so much for joining me and on this journey. I hope you've learned a lot about Excel. Thank you so much.